morning, I'm Jack Wheeler.
And I'm Cage Purtle.
We're members of the Choo Choo Forge at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Cage and I have developed a tong blank. It's laser cut, made out of 1/4 inch thick mild steel. The reins are 14 inches long from the boss to the tip. The boss is 7/8 inch by 7/8 inch with a 1/4 inch hole in the center of it. And the jaws are 1/4 inch thick by 3 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. These same tong blanks can be used to make a variety of different tongs. And some of those we haven't even thought about. We've thought about up to about 10 different tongs and made those so far. The only prep work you need to use these blanks is to grind down the corners. These are laser cut, so the corners are fairly sharp when they're cut, to relieve the edges of the corners. And depending on the type of tongs you're making, you may want to shorten the jaw to make different styles of tongs. The great thing about making a pair of tongs from a blank is 80% of the work done to make a pair of tongs is from the tip of the boss down to the tip of the reins. Making them from blanks eliminates that 80% of the work of making a pair of tongs. Now all you have to do is forge the jaw to the shape you want it to make the jaws of the type of tongs you are making. These tongs are made by an internet company called Send Cut Send. We send them a copy of what we want, they make them and they send to us. We've gotten several quotes of laser cut blanks to make these. Send Cut Send had by far the best price, and the delivery has been very great. The dimensions are exactly what we ordered, and we're very happy with the process. We're going to make a pair of bolt tongs today. Bolt tongs are a pair of tongs that have a wide opening adjacent to the boss hinge and smaller jaws, gripping jaws at the end. These bolt tongs are made for gripping awkward to hold objects like a hook or, of course, a bolt. So we're going to make these out of the tong blanks that we described earlier, and I'll get started with the first heat. The first step in making tongs using these blanks is to put a slight bend in the reins right up next to the boss to make them easier to tweak once they're in the assembly process. Another option on doing this bend at the base of the boss is to hold both of them around next to the rounded edge of the anvil, about a 1/4 inch from the edge of the anvil, and bend both at one time. That does probably a better job because it gets them bent to the same radius. And that bend makes them easier to assemble when they're ready to assemble. It also leaves a space between the reins so that doesn't interfere when you hang them on a tong rack, and it doesn't splay the tongs out so they get in the way. So you can see what they will look like assembled from the boss down with that. Tweaking the tongs after they're forged is a long process. If you've been in the blacksmith community very long, you've probably heard the saying, forging is quick, tweaking is forever. Well, that's the same case with tongs. You can spend a lot of time getting the tongs tweaked to the point where you really want to use them after you've forged and assembled the tongs. The second step in making the bolt tongs is to bend the whole jaw, the whole 3-inch jaw, down at an angle equivalent to this angle at the hinge boss. So I'll lay that over a fairly sharp edge of the angle with the intersection of the boss and the jaw right at the edge of the anvil. And I'll start bending this down, and if you try to bend when I bend it down, have to keep it kind of straight, otherwise it'll get out of control. Have to bend it down, and let it go too long, I'm going to have to take some more heat. We're going to bend this jaw down at a 45-degree angle equivalent to that angle on the boss hinge. Be careful not to forge it down too thin back here at the back. We're going to keep it 1/2 inch thick and not forge it down any so it'll be weak. Next step, if I've got enough heat here, is to turn it up flat to the anvil and start drawing down this slightly, leaving about 1 inch at the end untouched. So I'll draw this down. Be kind of careful not to hit that boss, that hinge boss, with the edge of my hammer. That will disfigure the hole. I might have to re-drill that hole. So I'm going to stop at that. We'll take another heat. I've left 1 inch of the end of the boss, end of the jaws untouched, and I'll take another heat and do a little bit of work here, drawing it down, making it a little smoother. And then we'll twist that end to get it in the right plane for the gripping jaws of the tong. All right, so I'm going to clean up a little bit on the jaw of that. I want a similar thickness and a similar width all the way from the edge of the boss down to where the jaw is going to be. And next I'll twist that jaw in the vise 90 degrees to get in the correct plane for the gripping jaw. I've left approximately 1 inch of this jaw, of the 3-inch jaw on these tongs, on this blanks, to unforged. I'm going to put them in the vise vertically, about 1 inch above the jaws of the vise, and I'm going to use my twisting wrench to twist that 90 degrees to get it into the correct plane for the gripping jaws. I'm going to put my twisting wrench less than 1/4 of an inch above the jaws of the vise. I'm going to twist it 90 degrees. Now, I want to do this at a fairly high heat. If I don't do it at a fairly high heat, I run the risk of having cracks where I do the twist. So now it's in the correct plane. It's bent just a little, but we'll fix that in the next heat. Okay, the next step in this process is to forge a little bit out here where I've done the twist. That will remove some of the evidence of the twist. Not that the evidence of the twist is a bad thing, but it gets it smoothed out and makes it a little bit stronger. I don't want sharp corners left. So now I've got a flat area about 3/4 of an inch long, and next heat I'm going to forge this wider so that I'll have a wider gripping edge, and I'm going to do that by hammering the corners down. I want it thinner out toward the edge on either side, and thick in the middle. That will leave a ridge down the middle of this gripping edge, so it's stronger in the middle than it is out on the outside edges. So I'm going to be hammering this gripping edge with an angled hammer. I want it rectangular shaped, not tapered. So I'm going to use the corner of my hammer, the top corner and the bottom corner, to hit those edges down at the edge of the anvil to get width down here as well as up here. It's easy to get width up here, but it's much harder to get width down here next to the edge. So I've got to use the corners of my hammer to do that. So that gives me a ridge down the center of this and thinner on the edges than it is in the center. The next step in the process is to bend this gripping jaw down at about a 30-degree angle. I'm going to do that at a little bit sharper edge of the anvil and hold it in place and bend it down. Not forging it to get it thinner, just bending it down at about a 30-degree angle. I don't want it any thinner than it is now. Next, we're going to bend a radius in this jaw around the horn. I'm going to use the horn where it's about 1.5 inches diameter. I'm going to put that up there on the horn at that diameter, and not forging it, we're just bending. Bend it around the horn at a radius that I like. And one of the things I'm looking for is for this jaw to be parallel with the reins. And right now it's not V yet, but it's parallel with the reins. Over this way a ways, I may need to get it closer to in line with the reins a little later. So next we're going to put a V in that jaw, and we'll do that on top of the animal with a V block and a chisel. I'm going to use a V block on top of the animal to V this jaw. Normally I would use my treadle hammer, but I understand that a lot of people viewing this video will not have a treadle hammer. So a V block is one of the specialized tools you need, as well as a 90-degree punch or chisel with a 90-degree angle on it. And this will V the jaw at 90 degrees when I put this in here. And obviously you have to have some help to do this if you're doing it alone. You can do it with a sharp peen hammer in here, but you can't get as good a V as you could with a chisel or a punch with a 90-degree shape. I have an automated power hammer in my shop. When I ring my anvil 3 times, the power hammer shows up ready to do the work. So I'm going to put this chisel or punch in place, and when I raise it straight up, he knows to hit. And we're going to V a jaw all the way back past the back side of the jaw so it will grip 90 degrees. All right, we finished the process of shaping one of the jaws or one of the sides of the tongs. Repeat that same process to make the second side, and as you can see, I've done that here, and these sides are very similar. You lay one on top of the other. They're also very similar in length and shape. So the whole process of forging is done. There'll be a little more bending to make these fit better after they're assembled. All right, the next step is to rivet the 2 jaws together. I've run a drill bit through these 2 holes just to make sure that during the process of forging the jaws I haven't distorted the holes so that the rivet won't fit. I'm using a 1/4 by 3/4 inch long rivet to rivet these 2 together. We're going to do it cold because rivets are designed to be done cold, and I don't want to burn myself while I'm doing the rivet. So I'll put the rivet in one of the jaws and put the other jaw onto the rivet. Now I'm using the heaviest part of my animal to do this riveting. I want a good steady process. The 3 things that are most important in a rivet job is when you put the rivet in, you hold the rivet straight up and down before you hit it. The second thing is you want to hit with your hammer flat. And the third thing is you want to hit very hard and use it over a solid part of the anvil so that nothing moves when you're hammering that rivet. So I'm going to hammer the rivet flat. I'm going to hit several flat blows, and then I'm going to start moving my hammer around the edge of the rivet to get it rounded on top as I get it closer to being riveted. That rivet is finished. They're so tight they won't move now. That'll change. I'll heat them up to adjust the jaws. You can see the jaws are much farther apart than they need to be. I'll adjust the jaws. The top side of the rivet is going to be a little bit larger than the other side of the rivet because I used a 3/4 inch long. I could have used a 1 inch, but that would leave it sticking out quite far, and you run more risk of bending the rivet if you leave it sticking out too far. And if any of you have ever dealt with a bent rivet, you won't like it. Now I'm going to start the process of adjusting these jaws of the tongs to hold the stock that I want to hold with it. I'm going to try, I've got a piece of 1/2 inch square here I'm going to have ready to try it, and a piece of 1/2 inch round. So I'm going to put them over the small radius of the horn, and you can see that the jaws are relatively far apart. I want them much closer together. So now they're coming together. I also want the ends even. And those ends need to be bent a little bit further back. So I'll do that over the edge of the anvil. And then I will put a piece of stock that I want to hold with these tongs and put them in here corner to corner. This is 1/2 inch square, corner to corner. Tap them down over the piece of 1/2 inch square to see how well they fit. And they fit pretty well there. Also 1/2 inch round can be used for these. The jaws are still a little far apart, so I'm going to tap them a little bit closer together so that when I put the stock in there, I still have some room to tighten up on the reins. So that stock holds fairly nicely. I will adjust them a little bit closer together to give myself a little bit more flex out here. One of the jaws moved over a little bit. I got to move it back. So that's where it holds. I want to hold them up this way to make sure the stock goes out straight from the edge of the end of the jaws. So that's the process of adjusting the jaws to hold the size stock that I want to hold with them. Next, I'm going to adjust the reins. As you can see, they're not lined up exactly with each other right behind the boss. So I'll need to put a little dog leg in each one of the reins to line them up. Lay it next to the edge of the heavy part of the anvil. One hammer blow there, one hammer blow there. That gets the reins more lined up with each other. When I did that, it distorted the jaws, so I'll line the jaws up with each other. So everything should be in line. We're going to do the touch mark next. I'll call my striker. He'll come over, we'll do the touch mark. My touch mark is handmade out of an old piece of ball peen hammer. We're going to put a touch mark right here on the upper part of the range. Hit. And that's the touch mark. Everybody please add your touch mark to your work so that people that are using it will know who made it. All right, we've done the final adjustment. This is the final product. I wire brushed it to get some of the scale off. And you can see that it's done, and it holds, this is 1/2 inch round very securely, and it's ready to go use.